So, hi everyone. I guess it's time to start. Welcome to the last ReInHerit webinar. Uh, I'm here. My name is Panagiotis Charalampos, and I'm here to talk to you about one of the tasks that we had in this project, which was about the development of a video game for a museum. So, before I start, let me just introduce a little bit myself. So I'm currently a researcher at the Science Center of Excellence in Nicosia, Cyprus. I have a team that's called Virtual Ephpnia, which comes from the Greek word ephpnia, which means to breathe easily without any effort. And the subtitle of my team is Living, Breathing Virtual Worlds. And our goal is basically to do to breathe life to virtual worlds by computer animation and computer graphics. I currently have a fairly large team consisting of several researchers coming from different backgrounds, I would say. I'm currently leading this team with another researcher at the center, which is Yorgos Chrysanthu, which is also the director of the center. So the goal of my group at the center is to do animation for humans, crowds, animals, and any other objects. We have several applications that utilize our research, such as digital twins, computer games, films, training, and cultural heritage. And our research focuses mostly on several technologies behind this. I will not go into the details. But as enabling technologies and what we are capable of doing at the center, we do a lot of computer graphics, computer vision, photogrammetry, motion capture, extended reality, including VR, AR, mixed reality, game engines, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. The team currently works on several projects. Several of them are Horizon Europe projects. ReInHerit is one of those projects. And we also have collaborations with other research institutes in Cyprus and abroad for local and European funds. Additionally, we have a collaboration with a big company in the States. Now, before we go into the details of our game, I will just briefly mention what video games are, their history, and how they relate to heritage and history. Before we dive into how we developed the game for this project. Now, basically games are structured forms of play, which we usually do for entertainment or fun, and sometimes we use them for educational tools. So some examples of games are backgammon, chess, etc. Key components of games include goals, rules, and challenge, and of course interaction. So basically, a game has to have some rules. It has to have some goals. So for example, in football, you know that you need to win the opponent, but you also have some rules on how to do that. And you have a challenge. For example, in football, it's a physical challenge and maybe also mentally. And then you have interaction with typically with other players. Now, video games are basically electronic games. Electronic games are basically games that utilize electricity to be played. Electronic games, for example, are pinball machines. But video games are a special version of these electronic games that involves interaction with a user interface to generate visual feedback on a screen. That screen can be a TV set, a monitor, a virtual reality headset, a mobile device, etc. Now, I would say that video games are probably the newest art form that allows you to do emergent storytelling, which is something that cannot be done with other forms of entertainment, such as movies and music. By using the interactive nature of games, people can create basically their own stories in the virtual worlds that they're playing in. Now, video games has seen an enormous growth over the last 50 years, I would say, 50, 60 years, I would say. Since Pong in 1972, we have seen a large amount of money being invested, but also being raised in video games. And we have several ways of playing video games, from our computers to our mobile devices, the consoles, and previously in the arcades. And I would say that the largest boom recently, I would say, is on mobile devices, because if you see the money that you get when you play video games in mobile devices, you get around an $85 billion revenue, which is almost the sum of all the other devices combined. And that's because mobile devices basically democratized the video game industry. And this can also be seen in this figure here. Now, when you develop a video game, you need to have a blueprint. And the blueprint for a video game is what's being called the game design document. So a game design document is basically a document that describes the game in detail. It has the title of the game, the rules of the game, the story, basic concepts, art that inspired the art of the game, the selling points, the platforms that you are targeting, technology, and the target audience. If somebody is interested to learn more about this, there are several books and online resources. I would suggest this is a nice book by Scott Rogers called Level Up, which can help you dive into the details about that. Now, if you want to see how a game design document looks like, you can find several of those online. I list some of this in the presentation, which, by the way, you can get after the end of this webinar. For example, here you can find the game design document of Wasteland 2, some old adventure games. You can find them on Archive and this website here. You can find the very nice book by Jordan Mechner on the making of Prince of Persia, which is one of the most influential games of all time. But also, something that's very interesting recently is that there is also an evolution of how people document the making of games. So, for example, again, Jordan Mechner wrote a book some time ago called The Making of Karateka. Karateka, it was a game that he developed when he was just out of college. And very recently, if you go to Steam or these online platforms or Nintendo's platform, you can actually find a multimedia version of the design document that explains more about the design of the game from concept to technical details. And actually, if you click on this link, you can see a video. I think we can play it probably here. Let me try it. Yeah. So I will just play a few seconds of this just to get an idea of what this is. Yeah.
It really stuck out as a precursor of everything that games would be.
I hope you can hear this.
Karateka.
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 Karateka. Karateka.
It was the most movie-like experience I'd ever had in a video game.
Love it. It's so good.
I didn't know who Jordan Mechner was, but I wanted to be like Jordan Mechner.
I was in college. I came home on vacation with this new project that was starting.
So actually, this game used a technique called rotoscoping to do the animation. Basically, you design on top of video frames to do the motion of
they had personalities.
Rotoscoping is literally tracing each frame to get a frame of animation.
The aesthetic and the motion was really unusual for the time.
I knew how important music was to tell a story, but I wasn't a musician. So I turned to my dad.
I said, well, why not have a series of beats that are tuned to notes?
It understood that
I think we can stop this. Okay. Yeah. So game design documents are fundamental in pitching a game and also as a diary of how the game is being developed over time. So one of the goals that we had in this project was to also document the process behind the making of the game, because that's something that we wanted to share with other institutions, and in case they would like to either use our game as a basis to do their own game, but also to see how we approached it from our side. So again, there are also some nice books that you can find out there. This is a list of them. Feel free to buy and enjoy. So I have to say that several of the video games that are out there do try to use historical context in what they're trying to do. So some of them use it as inspiration, but some others try to also be very accurate as with respect to history. So one of those first very successful games, it was called the Oregon Trail. It was a game that you could find in all the classrooms in the United States. It sold more than 65 million copies, and it basically aimed to show the travel and the efforts and all the struggles that people faced when they moved from Oregon to the west coast of the US, and they still do release versions of that game. So if somebody's interested, there is a version for mobile devices. Now, one of the most popular games that tried to be as historically accurate as possible was the Civilization. And when I say Civilization, I mean the entire series of the Civilization games that started in the 1990s, and they still are being released as we speak. Now, these games truly try to have accurate information about religions, political situations, political figures, etc. So, and they try to do that, and they manage actually to do that in such a way that it's not very, let's say, not entertaining for the people that play it. It's not like being in a classroom and being taught, but you're also being entertained by playing this video game. And they have historical figures in a cartoonish kind of representation, and so forth. Now, so typically strategy games of this type of games are tried to be as historically accurate as possible. Another really interesting game is Panzer General, which basically puts the player into the Second World War, the First World War, I'm not sure, and taking the role of tank battalions in the game. One game that does try to be historically accurate, but very superficially, is Age of Empires, which is a very popular series of video games, and it's actually one of the most successful video games of all time. And then there are games that try to use that instead of making you fight between, trying to force you to play a game that basically you have to fight a war between different civilizations. They try to approach history from a different way. So, for example, the Broken Sword series of games it's an adventure style game. Basically, it's heavily story based, but they do take lots of freedom with history, and basically they try to build a mythology around historical figures or events. So they do try to build some stories around historical figures, but which should not be taken into with a grain of salt. It's not reality. Like a game that does that really well is a game called The Ghost of Tsushima, which is inspired by a true story of the Imperial Mongolian invasion of Japan in the 13th century. And one of the really nice games that managed to actually make a lot of people feel something about history is called Valiant Hearts: The Great War, and it's basically it's a game that shows you the stories of 4 different people from the First World War, from both sides of the fight, to make you realize how bad the situation was from both sides, for the people from both sides. I urge you to play this game if you have a chance. There is a video, you can click on it later and have a look at it. I have to note here that the makers of this game, they communicated with people that created documentaries for the First World War to incorporate archived materials into the game, to try to make it as accurate as possible, even though the characters are fictional. Now, these are popular games, so there has been some efforts by museums and other cultural heritage institutions to build video games. I'm going to show some of them here. Now, one very popular game is called Father and Son. It is being advertised as the first video game released by a museum. It has more than 4 million downloads on mobile devices. And it's being set inside a museum. So it's a heavily story-based video game. And actually, we looked at this at the beginning because we thought, okay, maybe we could try and do something similar to this. And the same group also released this very nice game called A Life in Music, which instead of being focused on a specific historical event or let's say specific historical people, it's being focused around the music of Maestro Giuseppe Verdi, and it's the story of two young musicians, which their life revolves around the music of Giuseppe Verdi. So basically, and with this way, they managed to teach you about the maestro and his music. So another really interesting game, it's Past for Future, which is a story about escaping an unhappy present and romanticizing the past through history and artifacts in a museum. It's from the National Archaeological Museum of Taranto. And then there is this old game by the British Museum called Time Explorer. Unfortunately, you cannot play it unless you do some hacks, because it was developed on a platform that is no more supported by almost anyone. It's Flash, which probably most people now do not know about. So it was abandoned by most because of security reasons. So okay, so and another very interesting game that revolves around museums is called Nubla, from the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museo Nacional. And basically, this is a game where they use the art of, I'm not sure about the artist, to be honest, but they use the artist, the art of a specific artist, and they create a game inside his paintings. And the interesting thing about this video game is that they released development diaries, which you can find also online, and see how this team of people built this game and how their thought process behind it. Now that we recapped what other people did, let's see what we did in the context of ReInHerit. So in ReInHerit, we decided to build museum management game. But before I go into the details, we had to consider several things first. One of those, and it's very important when you're building a game of this type, is you have to be able to balance between the educational aspects of the game and the academic value. If you do something very academic, so you have too much information about that you throw up to people, you risk being you ending up as a very boring resource for people, and people will most probably not play the game, and they will not learn anything about the data that you collected for this game. So you have to be as high level as possible, but with enough information to convey the message that you want to pass behind your game. So, for example, on the left, you see Richard Feynman, which is a very famous physicist, that in order to teach physics to people, what he did is he did some really interesting experiments showing them the effects of what he was about to show them before diving into the very heavy equations and all of these details. So people could get information about the physics behind it. And if they were really interested in physics, they could learn about the math and everything behind it in more detail at a later stage. So these videos, you can find them online, and you can learn about pendulums and this kind of stuff. And another very important thing that we need to consider is that really video games that are being built in the industry currently, they're being built by armies of people. So they're not being built by 2 or 3 people, they're being built by hundreds of people, and with costs that are more than all, like 100 times the budget that you might have, or 1,000 times the budget that you might have. So, for example, this is the team behind Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's around 100 people. The game cost $100 million to make, and it consisted of people that had different expertise, from arts, audio, design, and for each one of those you have different categories of expertise. You have programmers, and when we say programmers, you don't just have programmers, you have programmers with specific expertise on building AI systems, engines, graphics, etc. You have testers that test the game before it's being released. You have a producer. You have Q&A managers, creative managers, etc. So it's a lot of expertise. Whereas in our case, we had a relatively small team. So when we started the game, it consisted basically of 5 people: Christos, Haris, Andreas, Theodoros, and myself. And the team was mostly technical in nature. So it was computer science oriented people. So one of the things that you need to consider is not how many people you have, but also what is the expertise of the people you have, and what you can build with the expertise that your people have. So computer scientists are typically good at building systems, and that's why we decided in the end to build a management game, which basically has a lot of systems that you can interconnect to build a bigger video game. Whereas if we tried to build a game that relied on a story and graphics and art, we would not be able to succeed because we don't have that expertise, or we would need to find that expertise from outside. But with the budget that we had, we decided this was the best way to move ahead with our game. So in order for us to get some inspiration, what we did is we went to the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Foundation, and we explored the collections that the foundation has. And the foundation has some really incredible collections of maps, photographs, again, more maps. They also have letters that were written by some people, and we actually thought about, at the beginning, we thought maybe we could build stories out of these letters, and we could utilize the maps and the photographs to build a nice story-based game out of it. And you see here some other images from their collections. They also had a really impressive collection of card postals that showed Nicosia and other areas during several periods. So you could see Nicosia in the 1920s, the 20th century, the 19th century up to now. They also have obviously a coin collection of all the coins in Cyprus. And they have also a traditional museum display where they have Cypriot pots and artifacts. So they have a really nice, diverse collection of artifacts that could be used to build a game out of. But during our visit there, we realized that maybe the game we should be building should not be a game about the artifacts themselves, but it should be about the people that manage the museum. Because actually, to me at least, it was very fascinating to see the people that worked there and how they handled everything and how they interacted with the objects, how they told stories behind those objects to us and explained their meaning and why they were important. So, after having these visits, we decided that maybe the best way to go was focus on the people, on how you manage a museum. And you see here some pictures of our visits there and how we interacted with the curator of the museum. So when we decided to do that, we searched and found some really interesting management games that are out there. A very nice game that actually my wife plays a lot. It's called 2 Point Hospital, and it's about managing a hospital, but in a very funny way, I would say. And also Idle Museum Tycoon, which is actually a game about building your own museum and managing it. So the game we decided to build at the end is called ReInHerit, A Journey Through Museum Management. It's a game that was built on Unity, and the reason we did that was because we wanted as a target platform to be web-based, so our game should be played on the web, but also it can be played on a machine. So it's easily converted. It can easily be converted to both platforms. So it's a museum creation and management game. The goal is to get a high score, basically reviews from the visitors. You can improve the museum with the help of funding and donations from people, not by selling products. You can hire and manage employees to keep the establishment clean and to deal with troublemakers, so people that basically might throw stuff away, or they might be throwing garbage in the floor or whatever. And we wanted initially for players to take multiple roles in phases. I have to tell you here that we only had like a few months to develop the game. So initially we had a lot of targets to reach and lots of gameplay things that we wanted to build. But during the development of the game, we had to make some adjustments. So initially we wanted to have like 7 or 8 roles. Then we decided on 4, which is architect, which allows you to build your museum, curator, where basically you have to curate the artifacts of the museum and place them and curate an exhibition, do the conservation part, and be an archivist. Now, we then went and designed the game flow. Don't look at these figures a lot, but basically this tells you the story of how a player will play the game. So the player launches the game, it goes through the start screen, then you have a menu. From the menu, you can start a game, you can load a game. Then when you start the game, you can build your museum, then you can do this, then you can do this, but then you can go back and iterate over time. And then at some point you might lose or win, and this kind of a flow. It just gives you a high-level view of how everything is being connected. And we decided, since we didn't have a lot of time, so we decided to follow an agile development way. So when we say agile development, basically we should aim to have a version of the game being playable once every 1 month or 1.5 months, and not wait until the end to have something completely playable. So our goal was to build something quickly and iterate over that and see if we could achieve our goals or not. So this is probably a way that small teams with limited budget and limited time should follow. Otherwise, they might end up failing in doing anything at all. So I'm gonna show you now some videos of the different roles you can have in this game. Before I start doing that, I have to tell you that basically the way we imagine the game is that you are, let's say, the curator of the museum, that runs the museum, let's say. You are sitting on your desk, so you have a desk, and you have like a miniature version of your museum that you can then select how to manage, and this is reflected into the real museum. So it's like you're actually being seated on a desk, and you have a high-level view, like a Lego of your museum. So the architect, who is the architect now? It's which video is the architect? What is this one? Oh no, this is sorry. This is the video for the architect. So initially you have a limited area where you can build your museum. So we built an interface where you can draw your rooms. You can open doors between the different rooms by connecting them, but you can also delete if you think that, this is not the correct design. Let's change the design of this. Let's remove that part of the museum, let's say. So that's the part of building the museum. So you can navigate around this, and you can even zoom in completely to the ground level and get a better perception of that. So as the game progresses, you get more funds, and you actually win. You are able to expand your museum to be larger, which this is not typically the case in real museums, but for creative reasons and for gameplay reasons, we allowed that to happen. Now, the second role that you take in the game is the role of the curator. And the role of the curator is basically you have to manage the artifacts that you have in your collection and place them inside the museum. And a video of that is here. Architect. This is the overview, sorry. No, this is the overview. Sorry about this. So this is the part of curation. So when you enable the curation mode, then what you have on your right is the exhibits that you currently have. And during gameplay, you actually have to get these artifacts. So what you can do is you can place the artifacts, and then you see, a cute character coming here and placing them. And actually, you can place them asynchronously. So you can place them, and they go back to the storage facility, and they bring them in their correct places. And initially, the artifacts are being placed on simple stands. And as you win money, as you gain money from donations, etc., you can actually upgrade the stands, so you can actually gain more money by donations, since people are being more impressed about your artifacts and your exhibition. So now, obviously, we needed to have some artifacts for the museum. So what we did is we went to the BOCCF and we scanned several of the artifacts with the help of the people there. So the people from the museum were always there. They were helping us moving the artifacts with the proper way and making sure that everything was being respected as it should. And on the left, you see how we did it. Basically, we used photogrammetry, and on the right, it's the 3D model of that specific artifact there. And you can actually find it on Sketchfab. Now, obviously, since we didn't have, the people that worked on the team were mostly computer scientists, we decided to get the services of Andreas Lernis. Andreas Lernis is a digital artist, I would say extraordinaire, an architect, cinematographer, and basically MacGyver. So Andreas is a digital artist of science, and he works on other projects in the center, which he basically came for a few days. He scanned the artifacts, and he produced everything in a matter of a few days. Now, additionally, we got all the models and we built different versions of the models, different levels of detail to be able to use them in a game environment. So you have to consider that typically when you generate a 3D model of an artifact, that's probably a very heavy artifact. It's lots of megabytes. So what we did is and actually most of the times you will not be seeing it from up close and personal. So what we did is we created different versions of the model with different levels of detail, which are enabled depending on distance and artifacts that you have at the same time in the environment. And how do you get these artifacts? So we built a mechanism into the game where basically what happens is that you get an alert that some new artifacts arrived in boxes from the Department of Antiquities. Now, what you do there as a gameplay mechanism is wired like a quiz. Basically, you need to identify which of the artifacts is real or not. So basically, you get like a list of 4 artifacts, let's say, and you have to say this is the real one, and the others are fake. And if you manage to do that, then you are able to exhibit to demonstrate that exhibit to your museum. And if you have lots of these artifacts, then you can gain income from donations from visitors at the museum. Now, how did we create the fake artifacts? We decided to use, one of the recent trends is that people use Midjourney and several generative AI tools to create assets or whatever. Now, it was very risky for us to use machine learning to generate actual artifacts for the museum, because we actually thought about using AI to generate artifacts in the museum. Instead, what we tried to do is we used AI to create fake, and you need to identify which ones were created by an AI. So what you see here are some images that you can get from these systems if you give them a prompt. Let's say, I want an ancient urn sculpted with caryatids, or an ancient urn painted with Odysseus slaying a dragon. This is what you get out of these systems. Now, because we wanted to make this a more challenging thing, instead of doing completely novel things, and actually before I go into that, we got the idea for this during our summer camps at the Science. So we had summer camps for high school students. about game development and artificial intelligence. And actually, we saw the interest of the students on AI and how they could be applied for generating content, or how they could be used, or how games could be used inside museums. So students had the chance of playing with several of these AI tools, and also learn how to do game development in Unity. And we actually asked them to do some artifacts based on museum historical figures, let's say, which we didn't use in the game. So we saw the excitement that they had behind that. So we thought that maybe that could be an attractive point for our game. So instead of using novel artwork, what we decided to do was, let's modify actual artwork. So, for example, let's take Mona Lisa as an example. Let's take that and use different prompts using Stable Diffusion, which is one of those systems, and modify it. So let's say modify the style. In some cases, it's very obvious, the difference. The left one is obviously very different. The third one is more or less similar, but a slightly different art style. But the final one, for example, we just selected the mouth and say, modify the smile and make it a little bit more weird. So you can actually see the pimples in the cheeks of Mona Lisa here. So we did the same with the artifacts that we have. So we scanned several artifacts at the museum. I think it's around 40 to 50. I don't remember exactly the number. We took pictures of them, and then we modified them using AI. So, for example, here, the real one is the second image. We created, for example, here on the left, a version that is obviously of Asian origin. So we made it look like it's from an Asian country. The third one, we modified it by saying, make it more like Batman, but still keep the style of it. And the last one is make it like a very famous ex-president of the United States. So we thought it was a fun way of doing the fake artifacts. Okay. And just a side note, you can actually just edit parts of the images. So you can actually, for example, get an image of Aphrodite without hands and say add hands. So that's an interesting way of generating content for fake things. And again, for modifying the paintings here, for example. Now, since we added these monuments, these artifacts, and you can actually add them in the museum, you can actually also navigate in the museum and actually get information about them. And you can do that by doing, hopefully it's this one. Yeah, this one. So you can actually click on an artifact, and you can actually get a first-person view of that, an orbit camera, let's say, where you get some information about it. But since we didn't want to have all the information inside the game, you can actually, if you see another artifact here, you can actually click on a link, and that takes you to the museum, to the museum's website, where you have more information about the specific artifact. So that's a nice way of integrating data that are existing inside the museum without making the game more complex than it should be. Finally, when you build your museum on a daily basis, you can have visitors. And what we did is we developed an AI system for visitors, where they basically, when you open the museum, they start navigating the museum, and you can actually see their reactions during their visit. I think it's this video here. Yeah, so actually, when you open the museum, you can actually see people, going around the artifacts, and you can see their expressions. And actually, here they're happy. but if you leave you and you see actually when they are really happy, you will see at some point the money going inside your bank account because they give donations to the museum. Now, if you notice, there are some areas where there is some garbage on the floor, and this gives a bad impression from the visitors, and they give a bad score for the museum. So you get notifications as you play the game, and you actually have to send a cleaning machine to clean the museum. Yeah. So we build an AI system for that. I will not show the details, but it's a pretty interesting thing by itself. Now, since we might have first-time visitors at the game, we also built a tutorial that plays when you start the game, and I will let that play now. No. Where's the tutorial? It's this one. Yeah. So okay. So when you first start the game, you get some tasks that you have to do in order to get acquainted with the user interface and how you play the game. So you see on the left the instructions, and when you manage to do it, you progress to the next step. So this is actually a really nice feature of the game. And this is actually something that was added after feedback we had from the experts at the BOCCF. Now, during development, we had frequent visits and meetings with BOCCF. You see here some screenshots where we had some very lively and interesting conversations about everything. Now, as our goals as deliverables for these projects were basically wanted to share the experience. For us, the experience is more interesting than the game itself, because that's where most people struggle. I mean, yeah, I want to build a game, but how do I go out there and do that? So we documented the whole process in a game development document. We are putting some posts on the digital hub of the ReInHerit project. We have the game design documents. We give some future directions inside that. We give the game and the source code, the 3D models, and all the content that we created, including tools. The game is currently runnable on the hub. You can scan the QR code here and go to the website, or you can click on the chat. We wrote the game design document, and here we got help again from another person at Science, Niki Geriago, which is a project manager at the center, and helped us keep it in an ordered manner. And yeah, that's it. So on behalf of the entire team, I would like to thank you. And I think now I can take some questions. We have 10 minutes, so I think we can get some questions. Also, if you don't have any questions, we have a survey for you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you to the chat. I don't know, you have any questions, you can post them in the chat. Yes, there is a question in the chat. If we have consulted heritage institutions to better understand management challenges and incorporate them into the game. Yes, indeed. We discussed a lot, mostly with the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Foundation, where they have their own museum. We got feedback out of them. Actually, we had a lot of things that we wanted to integrate into the game that were actually really very fundamental in managing a game, but due to time restrictions and actually so that we don't have a lot of, let's say, not boring, but lots of cumbersome tasks for people to do, we decided to keep it as simple as possible with that agile process that I described before. So yeah, we got a lot of feedback. We decided to keep just the basic functionality for specific stuff, but the game is expandable and we can add many of these as we move along, and we have budget for a continuation of that. Hope I answered your question. Yeah, so another question in the chat is if we feel that a creative team could bring a more aesthetic edge to the game that you are creating. Obviously. If we had the resources and the money and had a really nice creative team behind it, fully dedicated to helping us in this game, we would follow a different direction because we would have also the creative aspect behind it and not just the computer science aspect of it. So if you have more creatives into the game, we would probably follow a different direction. It might not even be a management game. It could be a 2D art adventure game, or it could still be a management game with more beautiful graphics and more, let's say, attractive components. Yeah, I think somebody's. That's a great question. So there is a question in the chat about what was the reason behind our choice to prompt AI to create fake artifacts instead of prompting it to generate its own artifacts. Because AI now is actually current AI models are under fire for several reasons. So one of them is currently they are being trained by data from different sources all over the web. And some of these data are good, some of those are bad, some of those are copyrighted, some of those are not. So using it to generate artifacts that we could say there are, since this is a project about cultural heritage, building fake artifacts and building a museum with fake artifacts does not give a good, I would say, give a good message. So we decided to say, okay, there is concern about AI, so let's add the critical aspect of players to identify what is being created by AI, because now actually people are being bombarded by fake images and audio and deep fakes of people doing stuff or whatever without being actually critical about what they get. So we try to have this critical part as part of the game. So on one hand, we didn't want to create fake artifacts because this is a cultural heritage project. We built a museum that is being based on the Bank of Cyprus Cultural Foundation. We didn't want to imply at any point in time that this museum would host artifacts that are not real. Yeah. Yeah, it's both, let's say, ethics reasons. I would say it's mostly ethics reasons behind it. We did actually create something that we didn't use in the end. That could be put in the museum, but it was not the artifacts themselves, but it was, let's say, the decoration on the floor. So it was the kind of marble stone that you would have that was generated by AI at the beginning. But we opted to use like a more grid-like design to have a simplified museum Actually, we had a more complex decoration for the museum, so that we focused more on the design of the artifacts and how they were placed instead of the surrounding part. And the second thing that we developed, we generated with AI is actually the image of the curator. I think if you go back, it's on slide. Where is the curator? I can't seem to find it. I removed it, sorry. So yeah, actually the image of the curator was generated by an AI. And we actually generated several curators for different tastes, including female and different ethnicities. Yeah, so I think it's time to open the survey. I don't know, can you see the survey? Can anybody respond? Yeah, so if you can answer these questions, that would be great. In some of these questions, you can have multiple answers. I see people are answering. That's cool. Thanks for attending. To whoever wrote something in the chat. Feel free to finish your questions first. You're welcome. So before everybody leaves, I just wanted to remind everyone that after the webinar, the presentation will be on the digital hub, and you can actually rewatch it if you want. You're welcome, everyone. So we have some really interesting answers. Okay. I guess, do I have time to comment on anything or not? From what I understand, the results are final. Yes. Thank you. So it seems that 60% of people responded. So on the first question, have you ever experienced the video games as part of a cultural heritage exhibit? 40% said no, 20 yes. So the people that did not experience video games as exhibits is double the number of the positive. Actually, question number 2 is dominates, quite surprising. Even though it was expected that yes would win. Everybody said yes, that people would feel more inclined to explore or support video games related to cultural heritage. And in the question, in your opinion, what is the most significant benefit of using video games to teach history? The most popular answer is they make learning more engaging. They make the experience, it's more accessible to the wider audience. And they're also cost effective and provided accurate portrayal of historical events. So everything contributes, but mostly people find that video games can be more engaging and they make it more accessible to people. And it seems that people think that museums and art galleries would benefit more from video games instead of libraries, let's say. The most appealing aspect of video games and for people is interactivity and gameplay, and then storytelling and narrative. Followed by graphics and educational content. So educational content is last. So actually, that makes you think that probably we should masquerade educational content in the story and the narrative, probably. And or actually, you need to mask educational content in all the other parts of the game, especially visuals and storytelling and narrative. Did this webinar change your perspective on the potential of video games for cultural heritage? It was mostly positive, yes. Some people already confirmed what they already knew. But it didn't greatly, I was kind of expecting that. It provided some new insights for most people. And what do you remember? Would you remember more from this webinar besides this guy? Is the potential of technology in cultural heritage and the process behind the building of the game. The use and the historical accuracy of video games is not that important. Okay. Okay, that's some nice results. Thanks, everyone. This was the last seminar of a webinar of ReInHerit. Hopefully, we will be talking soon in another project. See you.